Okay,
Yeah.
so what do you want to know?
Who is
No
Budi?
one knows who I am. That's part of my mystery. That's part of my. Our family is back in Indonesia. So
Indonesia.
so I came here in '98. Came here. I came out before I came here. Came out socially. As soon as I finished high school, and that's when I started hanging out with um, a group of gay boys back in
Yeah.
Indonesia and kind of started having friends. I was hanging out in the back street of Jakarta. I'm this kind of like middle class kid hanging out with, a bunch of sex workers, and they kind of, what are you doing here? And like, you make me feel comfortable, and they kind of
Yeah.
set off.
I'm actually really amazed that you were in high school and you were like just able to be so brave about, your sexuality and just you just dealt with it like yeah, thinking back that stuff like scared the shit.
Look, it wasn't an easy process.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, it
yeah.
didn't happen just like that. It took years and years.
But you did it
And
like at that
Well,
age.
yeah, and,
Yeah.
and that's what I said. Like the moment I finished high school, that's when it's kind of like
Oh, how did you know about your sexuality?
it's kind of like puberty hits, and kind of like, why am I looking at the boys instead of the girls? Why am I more interested in the boys instead of the girls? Why do I get along with girls, and why do I hate them as well? Kind of like, no, not hating them,
I
like
know
it's
what you
more
mean. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, why do I get along more with the girls? But why is it that I also don't feel like, there's no place of belonging here, and that feeling of being. I was in high school when it was basically early to mid 90s, and
Mm.
the word gay was not even in the vocabulary back then. It's kind of like um, it was, we talk about it, but we didn't actually know much about it. It's more like, like gays are just people who like same sex, and that's all we knew. There was no exploration, no explanation. And when I said that I was being teased and bullied, it's more not because of my sexuality, but it's more because I'm not masculine. I'm quite an effeminate person, and I don't follow that script of, this is what boys must behave, because again, sexuality was not even in our vocabulary. We just didn't have the word for it. I think for most queer people, it came to a point where we just kind of realized, hang on a second, we just can't lie to ourselves anymore. It got reached to that point where, for me, I just couldn't contain it to myself anymore.
Yeah.
It got to the point where there's two parts here. One part is about hiding and about trying not trying not to be who I am, and the other part is just to let go of everything and I chose that part, and that kind of led me to where I am now. It's kind of
Yeah.
like this journey of self discovery. Went through a lot of emotional pain to walk on that path, but it's kind of like it's sadly it's a necessary thing to do. There is no other way. Kind of like just have to walk through that pain and
Mm.
and get to the other side. And that's what I keep saying to people, because sometimes I kind of see my life and I just thinking, oh wow, you have it so easy. Well, actually no, it had to go through a lot of journey, a lot of long process to get
Yeah.
to where I am now. And I am fortunate. Look, I'm fortunate when the family asked me when I was, I still can't remember when. I think it was when I was 20 or 21. It's around that age. I didn't have to come out to them. They actually asked me, so we just have a question for you, are you gay? And I'm like, okay, yes, okay, yes.
Who asked that?
So my aunt asked, then mom told dad, and dad said, I knew, just like that, I knew. And mom was like stressing out for a few days before she was telling dad, and dad's
Yeah.
response just like, yeah, that's just who he is. I knew this for a long time, since
Wow.
a couple of years ago. So mom and dad had a little bit of a fight, because mom was like, well, if you knew, then how come you didn't tell me? And dad was like, I didn't want to upset you.
Holy, wow. That's such a remarkable story, Booty, because your mom actually like asked you the question. I don't think many people would, you know, have their parents actually even be able to confront that. It's like avoid.
I don't fit that typical boyish kind of attitude, don't fit that mold. So for them, it was more of we knew.
How did that go afterwards with your mom when you said after you said yes and then she
Would say that she was taken back, but not surprised. I think for her, it was more about why, how come it took you so long before you could say this to me? So she started having that kind of self guilt. And kind of like all parents, including my dad as well, they kind of started, what did I do wrong? Like, so, and I kind of said to them, it's nothing that you've done wrong. Even though from the beginning they were able to accept me, it's still a process as well. I had to give my parents and my family a space to mourn, to mourn the death. The death is their expectations of who I am and what I should become.
How's your relationship with your dad?
We stick to that Asian value of family really is important for us,
Yeah.
really have that strong sense of we don't really care who you are, what you do. We may disagree with it, but we will never say no to our family members.
Actually, so intrigued that your dad knew and was so cool about it.
But from what I gather, it's more of this slow realization that there's nothing that he could have done
Right.
to change who I am. And I think that kind of slow realization has started since dads kind of start noticing, like, hang on a second, never actually talk about girls. My brother talked about girls quite a bit, but he never actually said anything about it. So it was, for him, it was a process as well. He just never said it out loud or shared it with anyone.
Right.
So when the day come, he was, and I think that's a good thing, and that's what I really appreciate from both of my parents. They actually took the time for themselves to prepare them for what's coming. When I came out, it's like reliving the teenage years of, I delayed my teenage years.
Yeah.
Because I was so focused on knowing who I am, my sexuality, being comfortable, relationship, friendship group, being out and about, kind of like finding a place, finding a space. It's kind of like all of that. My friends, my heterosexual friends went through all of that in their teenage years.
Yeah.
So their 20s, for me, it was like teenage years was about sorting out who I am, feeling comfortable with who I am. My 20s was kind of like revenge. Like, this is my years. These are my decade of having teenage drama.
Yeah, actually, it's a really good point you make there because with the queer community, we are like figuring out our sexuality, or even for me, my one is suppressing it, so not really able to just enjoy being a teenager. So I don't know what that feels like. Like I don't know how my teenage years was very much like trying to, be okay with myself rather than like, oh, I'm just gonna they're cute or they're like no, you don't
It
get to
didn't,
express.
it didn't even enter our mind.
Yeah.
I kind of like had crushes, but then felt guilty for having crushes, and then kind of
Ashamed
like,
and
who am
guilty.
I? Ashamed, guilt. Who
Yeah.
am I? What am I doing? Why I was born this way, and trying to figure it out. So in my 20s, when I came here, started knowing other queer communities. That's where okay, well, I have a community to belong, that I feel that I'm part of. Then suddenly all of that build up kind of tension from the teenage years, they all just kind of boom.
Yep, you're ready to express like, the booty comes out,
Yeah, well, it's more like about 10 years of, going through that teenage years, kind of like, oh my God, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
But it's needed, and I had to go through that stage, for me anyway, to be able to be where I am now and having that insight and that maturity has to go through that stage. People will have their own different journey on how they get to where they are.
It's like growing up in a, heterosexual world, I feel like where I'll learn how to be the part of me that is queer, where I learn how to be a lesbian, is when I'm actually with another female. And until I do that, I don't really. There's always a thing that I don't actually know. Like it's just a theory.
Yeah, but I like to challenge you on that one because if we're following that analogy, then we are making an assumption that guys have sex with, who we have physical intimacy with.
Mm.
That's not helpful. It's kind of asking that question: how do you know that you're straight? How do you know that you're gay? How do you know you're lesbian when you never been with someone of the opposite sex or someone of the same sex? It's kind of like that's not the point.
No.
The point is about we know that we have an attraction.
Yes.
Some of us only attracted to one gender or one sex, and that attraction doesn't have to translate to having physical. I think we have to move beyond that. I think we kind of say your attraction is valid, even though
Mm.
you never actually physically intimate with someone of the same sex or the same gender or someone who's identical. Our communities sometimes can be very good at excluding people and kind of saying, well, you can't claim this space if you've never been with someone this sex. You can't claim
Yeah.
this space if you've never been with someone who's queer. And kind of like, well, aren't we just like, it feels like we are being hypocritical.
Where I'm sort of coming from is like I don't feel like I'm any less of a queer or a lesbian. It's more that
Yeah.
it's the attraction, right, that I define that makes me a lesbian, is that I'm attracted to same sex, and
Yeah.
not being in a relationship. It's like I can't experience that attraction and find who I am when I feel that attraction. Like who is the me that
Mhm.
comes out from that experience? Like that's sort of the part of me that I won't know until I'm in a relationship and being able to feel that and experience that with
Yeah,
someone. Yeah.
but it could also be that you will not be able to find someone physically attractive until you form that strong bond with someone. Yeah, it could be that. Um, and there is a word for it. Demisexuality is about that.
Yeah.
Demisexuality is about, that physical attraction comes after I am emotionally connected with you.
I've heard of that one before. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Mm.
so there are many ways that people express their sexuality and their attraction.
Mm.
For some people it's just like physical first, then emotional later. For some people it's kind of like physical and emotional comes together.
Mm.
And for some people it's like, well, the emotional have to come first, then the physical comes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for some people it's just purely the emotional,
Yeah.
the physical just never there, and
Mm.
that's completely fine. And I think broadening this concept about sexuality and relationship is very important. So we don't feel guilty again.
Yeah.
We already being in a relationship should not be a benchmark of someone's identity and someone's queerness.
Yeah.
Being in a relationship should be, in my world, it should be a bonus. Like it's a bonus if you can have a relationship. It's
Yeah.
a bonus if you can find that emotional bond, that physical attraction with someone. Um, but we're living in a society where and we're living in a community where is that's it. You have to be this, you have to be that. In the gay community it's very much about you have to be like sexually active.
Right.
In the lesbian community it's kind of like you're still single. Why? There's so much pressure on being in a relationship. It's kind of like, oh god,
Is there? I
like
don't
gay
know.
men.
Is there a lot of pressure? I don't know if there is. I'm just interested to experience.
I like to use the analogy of someone who got bullied quite a lot, when they were growing up.
Mm.
And they finally found a place of belonging that they feel they belong, they feel they're part of. Um, and suddenly they have a sense of currency, social currency. Oh, wow. People have put me down for so long. Suddenly I am no longer down here, I am up here.
Yeah.
And if we haven't dealt with the trauma, this is what I strongly believe. If we haven't dealt with the trauma, being bullied, being ostracized, being alienated,
Yes.
then we're going to be the oppressor. We're going to repeat the cycle again. And this
Yeah.
is one thing that we actually need to have conversation about. How do we stop that cycle of
Mm.
alienation and marginalization from within? Because we
Yes.
knew what it feels like. But when we are on top, we forgot what it feels like because suddenly we have the power, suddenly we have the currency. And the same thing as well when we are in relationship as well. If if our sexuality has been framed mostly around whether I am in a relationship or not, that's a dangerous kind of area there. Because what happens when we are in a relationship, we feel so high up here. And hopefully I haven't done it. I probably have, like, let's be honest. But kind of like up here, and then we started kind of looking down at people who are not in a relationship. We start looking down at people who are who's single or whatever, whatever status they are in. And that shouldn't be the benchmark of our sexuality. The benchmark of our sexuality should be about feeling comfortable with who we are, who we like, who we're attracted to, who we love, who we want to get in a relationship with, and who we don't want to be in relationship with. That should be the benchmark. In my view, where some relationships not actually working, but they felt that they have to stick together because of those walls. It's not actually working.
What do you mean they have
one
to
person
stick
is
together because of the walls? What do you mean by that?
well, put it this way. So I'm kind of like using myself here as an example. If I still have those walls up, so I'm not actually letting people in. I think I let them in, but actually not. And the other person doing exactly the same thing, then it's kind of like this. It's kind of like this magnet. They never connect. Doesn't matter what push in there, because those walls are those barriers. I needed time to dismantle the brick wall, to really understand what happens, to really kind of see it from a different perspective, and to really work on myself before I can get into another relationship where I can actually feel comfortable of letting people.
Kind of got me interested in being in a relationship was actually like this personal development program I was doing, and it talked about this like different levels of self, and there's a self that comes out in relationships, and there's a self in like on our own, there's a self in community, and it just got me really thinking about like I don't know what an intimate relationship feels like, and like who's the me that's gonna come out there. Like I won't discover that until I be in a relationship, but I'll discover me that's on my own.
Yes, and I would say that you still can express all those things that, not to the same level of intimacy, but I still think that you can still express it. And it's, yes, of course, it will be different kind of intimacy. It will never be the same as having someone in our lives, but that sense of affection, that sense of closeness, that sense of openness, we cannot always do that to our friends, and sometimes we actually have to turn around to our friends and say, I'm not hitting on you. Well, I'm not interested in you. I'm just exposing my vulnerable self to you. I'm just being emotionally available to you. Get off your high horse. I'm not attracted.
Is that something you've had to do?
Yes. Set the boundaries first, and then I'm like, I'm being affectionate to you, but I don't want to be with you. Just calm down.
Just let me express.
Yes. But I also learned from my friends who are in the older generation, in their 50s and 60s, who didn't actually found that concept of love until much later on. So I think we kind of like put pressure on ourselves. It feels like we put a time, if we put a limited time on ourselves when speaking to so many different people of all different ages. Sometimes they find love in their later years, and that's the best thing that ever happened to them. So I think we should stop putting pressure on ourselves and saying, time is ticking. Actually, no, time is not ticking. And I would rather, because because that's what I don't want. I don't want my sense of worth, and I don't want my sense of self to be tied to a relationship status. To the baby quiz.
Yeah,
Oh
the
my
baby
god, baby
quiz.
quiz. Take your time. That's the only. I've been saying this over and over again. Take your time. There
Yeah.
is no pressure. There's no pressure to come out. There is no
No.
pressure to be in a relationship. There is no pressure to be community involved. There's no pressure to be to walk down Fitzroy Street for pride or to be there shouldn't be a pressure. Just take your time.